Well, hello, and welcome again to the 2012fad.com. I'll be your host for this evening, and my name is Charlie Bluehawk. Last night, we talked about money is no longer the goal, and how the top 1,000 corporations in the world are no longer in the businesses they originally were in, because now they make all their money the same way. In the international drug trafficking business with their best partners in the world, the international bankers. And right now, in the United States alone, there's so much money, so much cash just literally sitting in warehouses. There's so much cash in the United States, they honestly don't know what to do with it all. You and I don't have any of it, of course. It belongs to us, but we don't know that. And we talked about also how when they do have any kind of competition, the major corporations compete against each other by seeing who can borrow this drug money at the lowest rate. And whoever borrows it at the lowest rate, well, they win. And we talked about how AOL, not that long ago, maybe a decade or more, was a company going out of business. And as they were going out of business, going under for the third time, all of a sudden, they had the cash to buy Time Warner, which was at the time the largest media company in the world. So how did a company like Time Warner, going into bankruptcy, going under for the third time, suddenly, magically, have the cash to buy Time Warner? Well, they went to the Caribbean, they got their drug money at a very low rate, they borrowed it, they bought Time Warner. They have since, of course, lost Time Warner because when you do things like that, when you just have the money and you buy something, you have no idea how to run it, you have no idea what you're doing, you're going to lose it. And they lost it. I have no idea what went on in the background, and frankly, I don't want to know. So anyway, we were talking about how businesses that we think of as car manufacturers, cosmetic manufacturers, electronics manufacturers, those businesses are no longer important because money is no longer the goal. Controlling us is. Taking away our jobs, taking away our lives, our homes, our futures, and leaving us lost and broken. That's the goal. And frankly, our masters are doing a wonderful job, and we just let them do it. I don't know why. And, it's a shame that there are not enough of us who care to make any kind of difference. This is why I ran away. This is why I fled the States a few years ago. No intention of ever setting foot there again. But the truth is, I've been fighting this battle pretty much alone for 40 years now, and it's taken me that long to figure it out. While you were out partying, I was trying to make a difference. No more, you're on your own. And so tonight, I thought we might chat about Cosmo Hates Women, Cosmopolitan magazine, and how this programming of Western culture is going on at every level imaginable. I mean, nothing is missed, nothing at all. And I remember the very first time that I read Cosmo, Cosmopolitan magazine. I had arrived early to the place my friend Michael owned a hair salon, and I would go there every couple of months to have him cut my hair. I had nothing else to do that day, no place to go. He had a salon at the time in the shopping mall in Glendale, California. Now, Glendale, California is a suburb of Los Angeles. It's a fairly big mall. It's in what we call the Valley. It's just one valley in from the basin. The basin is Los Angeles proper. And it was probably the most boring mall I've ever been in my life. I'd been there, I guess, too many times. So rather than wander through this boring mall again, I sat down in Michael's hair salon and I picked up the latest magazine, or the one nearest to me, and it happened to be Cosmo. I'd never read Cosmo before. I'd seen it in the newsstands, very glossy, very beautiful girls on the cover. And when I picked this thing up, the first thing I noticed was how heavy the magazine was. It was huge. And it was very tightly packed with more pages than I thought you could actually get into a magazine. And so I started to read front to back, and I have to admit I was amazed. The next thing I noticed was that in Cosmopolitan magazine, Cosmo, you cannot tell where the advertisements end and where the articles, such as they are, begin. The advertisements and the articles all run together. And the only common theme through the articles and through the advertisements through Cosmopolitan magazine to women are, you are ugly, you are fat, you are stupid, and no man will ever want you. And, you're looking at this and I can't, I couldn't believe what I was reading. But then Cosmo goes on to tell these women, we can make you less fat, we can make you less ugly, we can make you less stupid if you give us all your money. And oh yes, by the way, men are the cause of all your problems. And I'm reading this and I'm going page by page because I want to, I don't want to miss anything. I want to make sure that I'm getting this right. And I have to admit, this magazine just goes on forever. And as I said, you can't tell the advertisements from the articles. And so as I'm reading this monstrous thing, it goes on to tell women in the United States, in the Western world, that in order to be a real woman, a modern woman, a Cosmo girl, they must have a full-time job, they must be upwardly mobile, they must be married, they must have children, they must prepare elaborate meals that no one would ever eat, they must exercise until they are a stick figure, they must dress and look and act like a fashion model, they must do charity work, they must run the household single-handedly, and they must go partying with their girlfriends every week. Well, I'm really bad at math. I'm actually horrible at math, but by my rough calculations, for a woman to be a Cosmo girl, to be a real woman in the United States, in Western culture, she'd have to live and be awake 200 hours every week. Then you add on top of this the overall theme, men did this to you, men are to blame for everything. So literally, women in the United States who were, I can't say the word okay because most American women are not. They've been programmed to a point where it's just unbelievable. But this is where the breaking point really comes. When a woman decides to start reading Cosmo because she wants to be a real woman. Now, no one I know can work a 200-hour week and survive. First of all, on my calculations, there's only 40 hours in a 5-day week. But how could anybody live up to these unbelievable expectations and not go crazy? More times than I can remember, there'd be a group of older women that I would know, and one of them would all of a sudden decide to start reading Cosmo. And even the other women would say, my God, she's gone crazy. What happened? She started reading Cosmo. Oh, okay, never mind. It's like when, and I've been working since I was 5 years old, and I've been in the corporate world since, I think, 1985, pure corporate world. And women would come into the workplace for the first time. And the first thing they would do is they'd start screaming about how they were locked out of upper management, how their bosses were always hitting on them for sex, both men and women, and that if they didn't give in to these demands for sex from both the men and the women, they would not get promotions, they would not be able to keep their jobs, they'd lose out of promotions to their bosses' pals, and how unfair it was to be a woman in the workplace. And I tried as nicely as I could to explain that I've been working my whole life and exactly the same things that were happening to them had happened to me. I had been hit on by both men and women, my bosses, and I had lost jobs because I would not give them sex. I had been locked out of upper management because I was not part of the in crowd. Didn't matter if they were men or women, they were the in crowd. What my ex-CIA friend refers to as the Ivy League, with tremendous scorn and just as well. But Cosmo tells women that they are locked out of their jobs only by men. Only by men. And that a woman would not do that to another woman. Well, I'll tell you right now, that's a lie. A couple of times in my life, I actually tried filing sexual harassment charges against women who were my bosses, who had hit on me, who then tortured me because I did not give them sex. And you know what happened when I went to file those charges? I remember when this happened when I worked at NASA and I was going to file charges against my boss, this woman, and I used the word vaguely with her. And the ombudsperson there, the woman who ran the ombudsman's office, just looked at me and says, honey, don't bother. Nothing will happen to her. You can file it. I'll take the file if you want, and if someone ever bothers to file again, at least there'll be a charge, in her file against her. But personally, I'm giving up because this job's a joke. So the woman who ran the ombudsman office was quitting, and she told me don't bother to file a charge against a woman boss because it's a fantasy. It's ridiculous. And then Cosmo magazine goes on to tell women that a man could never be sexually harassed at work. Really? Well, I'll have to remember that, as I lost my 5-year job at NASA because I refused to have sex with my female boss. And after she got the job, I was there for 5 years, and for the first 2, she was just this fellow's assistant, and he got some sort of promotion, and she threatened to quit if she didn't get the job as our manager. And because in the United States you get brownie points when you have female managers if you promote them. Doesn't matter that they don't know what the job is. Doesn't matter if they're not qualified. As long as she's female, you get brownie points for putting her into a management position. And then they go ahead and destroy the department. But after 3 years of having this job, she finally managed to get me laid off. And she tried so hard, so many times. And a few weeks after a whole bunch of us had been laid off, they actually had to hire 4 people to replace me. A few weeks later, they didn't, of course, call me. And those 4 people, none of them knew how to do their jobs and never even bothered. It was amazing propaganda, Cosmo magazine. So I thought, what the heck, I will read GQ magazine. Now, before we leave Cosmo, I have to tell you, I got about 75% of the way through Cosmo. And it was the worst hatred against women I've ever read. And quite involuntarily, I flicked the magazine away from me. My hand, all by itself, flicked the magazine away from me. That was my reaction. Thank God, as the thing flew across the room. It was so heavy. Luckily, it landed on the floor and didn't hit anybody, because if somebody had been hit by this thing flying, it would have hurt them really badly. But it was completely involuntary on my part. My hand flicked it out of me, just away from me, just to get away this hatred away from me. But I thought, I better read GQ because it's the top magazine for men. Okay, fine. And of course, lots of women read GQ to look at the men. Makes sense. But again, this was the first time I'd ever read GQ magazine. And the first thing I noticed is the men, quote unquote, in GQ are all young, scrawny, gay boys pretending to be grown heterosexual men. Now, since I grew up in Hollywood and I used to be a model a long time ago, and I was in the entertainment business a lot, I know a lot of the gay boys who modeled for GQ, and they thought it was very appropriate that they, as young, gay, screamingly gay boys, were good role models for straight men. I said, really? Okay. And what about the women who read GQ to look at the guys? They actually fell in love with this role model of what the American man should be. And according to GQ, it needs to be young gay boys. I can't tell you the number of American women I met, older women, married women, that I, just in passing, I talked to GQ about. Because you really can't talk, as a man, you can't really talk to single women in the States, except for my lesbian friends. I am a lesbian magnet. I have no idea why. But lesbian girls just love me. They just love me to pieces. And in the States, that helped me a lot, because it was often my lesbian friends who actually protected me from the single girls who wanted to have me thrown off of the job because I was a man and I showed up. But my lesbian friends always leaped to my defense. So whenever I was in a corporation, and corporations have all these little tribes, there was the gay boy tribe, there was the lesbian tribe, there was the straight women over 40 tribe, there were the straight women under 40 tribes, and then there were the very rare single straight guys who were just trying to hide. I was in that category. But I can't tell you the number of times the lesbian girls came running to my defense when the single straight girls wanted to get me fired because I had dared, show up for work. It was really something. I learned to walk in America by staring at my feet. Never make eye contact with women in the States. It's tantamount to suicide. But luckily I'm a lesbian magnet. My lesbian friends came and protected me. So anyway, I was talking to married women who were married to men about GQ. And every single one of these older married ladies was thrilled at how beautiful all the men in GQ magazine were and how gorgeous they were. And so when I pointed out to these older married women, women married to straight men, that these ideal role model males of what the American man should be were all young gay boys. And their reaction was always the same. They had to actually stop and think about it. Well, gee, I never thought about that. It never occurred to them that these very effeminate, very slender, young, pale, little boys were all gay. The married women liked it because all of these men were so feminine. And to the American married women, this was a good thing. Men to be feminine was a good thing. I didn't get it. And these married women, I knew the men that they were married to. They were all straight, they were all hardworking, they all supported their families. But all their wives hated them and wanted nothing to do with them. I never could figure that out. One of my favorite yoga teachers, a very nice gentleman who also worked at JPL, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He worked for NASA. I worked at Caltech most of the time. He worked at JPL. And I just happened to meet him at one of the yoga studios in a place called South Pasadena. Very nice man. Amazing yoga teacher. In a weak moment, I promised him that I would become a yoga teacher myself. And of course, since I gave my word, now I've got to keep it. Damn it. But I will, Scott, I promise. You'll never hear me give my word unless I plan to keep it. So I try never to give my word. Anyway, so now I'm stuck. I have to become a yoga teacher one of these days. Lovely man, really a nice soul. And he was not effeminate in any way. And he had muscles from yoga that I still can't believe are possible. And he married a woman who hated him. And my heart broke when he told us this, and because this woman she didn't like him, but she married him. And that's America. That's why I left the country. It's one of the many reasons. But it is amazing how we are programmed in the States. Women programmed in Cosmo drives them crazy. Women programmed by GQ thinking that gay boys, that men should be effeminate. And they all believe this. And they believe it because Cosmo says so. In the States, under the law, if a woman marries a man, that man becomes instantly her slave. And it's under U.S. law. That woman can do anything to any man she marries. He is her personal private property, her slave, until the day he dies. Or until the day that she remarries, and trust me, that's not going to happen. I knew one guy, again, very nice guy, but a very common story that I'd heard and seen too many times. He'd been married, had 2 children, got a divorce. He just couldn't take the abuse anymore. The next thing he knows, his wife, who is, don't even want to describe her, she gets the children because she's the woman. The next thing he knows, he's working 3 jobs, and he's living in his car. He worked for us as a system administrator during the day, and at night he worked at Starbucks, and he was there every single night. And every morning he'd get off work, come straight into his day job, which was with us, and he brought us leftovers from Starbucks, thank goodness, because the job didn't pay much. So we ate really well from day-old Starbucks food. Thank you, Starbucks, by the way, good food. I don't remember what he did on the weekends, but he was always broke. He was living in his car, and his wife lived like a goddess. Would she remarry? Why should she? She had her own personal slave, her own personal ATM machine that was forced by law to work every day of his life to support her. That's your reward as a man for falling in love in the States and getting married. And the woman, well, she can get away with it up to and including, sometimes, murder, and get away with it. English gentleman I knew in the film business came to the States, was a film distributor, and he actually was dating an American woman for a while until he actually overheard his girlfriend plotting with 2 of her other girlfriends how they were going to marry one of the other girlfriends off to this very old, very wealthy man, and then plot how they were going to rob him of all his money. And they actually, and this is very common with American women, they actually would talk about this quite openly in front of men because they think we're stupid, I suppose. And he was so disgusted, my English friend, he immediately went back to England and said, I'm not having nothing to do with this. It's when American men like myself go overseas and discover for the first time what women really are. You meet real women when you leave the States. Not New Zealand, that's a nightmare I won't dream on anybody, but any place else. You actually meet women who are actually women, and it's sort of stunning to you. It absolutely takes you by surprise, and you don't know what to do. My first trip to New Zealand in 2003, I think I got as far as Auckland, and at the time I looked like a rock star because I had very long hair and I had this long leather jacket and big black boots. I was trying to tone down my look because I looked frankly like, well, either a mafia hitman or a cop. So I was trying to look harmless. But women in Auckland, beautiful women in Auckland, New Zealand, were coming up and talking to me in the street, and this absolutely blew my mind because women don't do that in the States. If you make eye contact with a woman in the streets, you pretty much signed your own death warrant, which is why I moved to New Zealand and then realized that wasn't the case. Me, I seem to still find all the worst places on the planet, but I think Europe is pretty nice. I'm in Central Europe now, and women here are quite astonishingly beautiful and friendly and kind. And so once I have a real job again and a real income, and I actually feel worthwhile, I'll think about having a girlfriend. But this is what Cosmo teaches. And if you want to have a real eye-opening experience, go to the store, buy a copy of Cosmo magazine, and just be prepared. For all of us here at the 2012fad.com, this is Charlie Bluehawk, and I'm wishing you a really good day, and reminding you, please, always keep just that one good thought. The 2012 Fad is brought to you by Coffee and Blood, Love Letters Between the Dead, a series of 5 erotica horror novels about a fallen angel finding his way back to regain his own soul, and how the CIA war against the human race, their black magic, captures and traps him in the body of a mind-controlled slave designed to hunt down and to kill their god, their Satan.